Okay, I just wanted to get a real review out for this Leatherman Leap before I started my modding process of the tool. There's definitely some things that I think could use some work, but I think it's important to give this tool a fair review before I do anything else. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to walk through the tools on the outside one by one. I'm going to try to start with the easiest one to go through, and then we'll progress from there. Hopefully we'll get through it rather quickly, and then I'll have a chance to talk about maybe who this tool might be for, and also what you can do to improve it if you choose to. So first of all, this is the kick. It comes in at $39.95 right now. It is $10 cheaper than I think it started with, and at $40 it makes it cheaper than either the Sidekick or the Wingman, I think by $20, which is surprisingly inexpensive for what it is. And it's not really fair to compare them per se because of their sizes. This is significantly smaller in length, not necessarily in width, but in length than those tools. To put a size comparison in here, here is the Leatherman Mini tool, one of my favorite design tools that exists. Now this tool was in the process of being modded, so it has different pivots, but basically it's the same thing. But you can see this tool, although it's a little thicker, definitely thicker, it's also just a little bit bigger than the Mini tool as well. Something that puts it in a very interesting size range for your pocket. It doesn't have a pocket clip. I think that's a big problem, but we'll talk about that closer to the end, I think. So first thing I want to start with is the one-handed opening Phillips driver and bottle opener. With this being the way this is on an outside tool like that, it's the fastest bottle opener in the West, if you will. It truly is the easiest one to access of any multi-tool I've ever seen. If you really need a bottle opener and you need it fast, this is the tool for you. Let's move on real quick. One thing that I am concerned about, but as I look at it, it seems to be a little bit less than I originally thought. This shape might make it more difficult to fit into some of the recessed areas that a screw might be located in. So only time will tell how effective that really is. But it is sort of the same sort of hybrid, not quite 2D, but definitely flatter Phillips. I find that these work fairly well for most things anyway, so I don't really have too many complaints about how effective these are as a number 2 Phillips driver. Now let's move on to the scissors. Now this one's going to be a little bit longer. Originally I got really excited with these because I was hoping beyond hope that these would be the scissors that Leatherman makes that will finally allow me to get rid of my Victorinox multi-tool that I carry every day, which is the Manager, that small scissor on the Classic. I just needed something to accomplish the same sets of tasks. One thing this has is a great shape. It still lets me do a lot of things for my nails. It lets me work really up close and personal with the tip, all of which I like. And I also want to say that the cutting from the middle of the tool, I'm having a little trouble focusing here, the middle of the tool to the end is excellent, but it's where it's closer to the inside that things get a little hairy. If you can kind of see this is a very fibrous thing, and it makes it very hard to cut. Now it has no problem at the end of the tool, but as you get closer, like, it's fine right there, but if I kind of have to start pulling up and away on this tool. But when you get here, it's very obvious that you have an issue. Now, I've had this happen to so many scissors. The only scissor that really accomplishes that effectively is the Victorinox that is on both the Classic and the 91mm, or the Pioneer X. I think that's 93mm, which is the A-Locks. So scissors on Victorinox, still king for sure. Now, the next tool I want to look at is the saw. And this is a great saw. It is incredibly sturdy. In fact, I think it's almost too sturdy to be quite as an effective saw. It's even thicker than the one that's found on the Wave. It has a really cool nail nick, actually. And one thing I want to mention, though, that every tool, I've been able to open every single tool one-handed. Obviously, you can do that with this one. To get these scissors out, I simply pull when it's like that, and no big deal. Easy one-hand opening. And then one-hand closing is quite easy. You just hold it with one finger and you push. The fact that the locks are on the outside actually is quite nice. I'm surprised they haven't incorporated this design before. I guess you have to use plastic in order for that to occur, but maybe I'm wrong. Now, the saw is kind of interesting because of how hard and stiff it is. It probably makes it a fairly good saw for using on drywall. So if you want something in your pocket that you can kind of punch a hole through drywall with, this might not be too bad. It's also quite shallow, which is perfect for that task. I was able to successfully use it with pretty much everything I wanted to do woodworking wise. It's not going to cut a very long sapling. I think I found it's about 3/4 of an inch shorter than the saw found in the Wave. And so that means it's going to cut, you know, a smaller sapling. And it's also, but it's, as far as notches and that kind of thing, it's still going to be just as effective. Now let's move on to the biggest thing, which is the blade. This is where I got my biggest surprise, I think. This knife, I should say, is much more robust than I would have otherwise expected. Not only that, unlike other cheaper Leatherman knives, this does not have a hollow grind. It is actually flat grind. And it's got a great profile. It's got a very, very nice, stiff, rigid profile. Combine that with the great ergonomics of the handle and how fat the handle is, and you can really, really bear down on this when you're whittling or doing anything with wood. I actually found this to be the most enjoyable knife I've used on a Leatherman for any extended period of time, which really is quite an accomplishment. There's a lot of very nice knives. The Charge ALX has a really, really nice, comfortable grip. The only problem is, like the Wave, that one is, of course, a modded one, but like the Wave, the serrated blade always bites into your hand when you have extended use of the blade. Now, of course, this one is removable. Now, let me quickly just demonstrate that it is quite easy to remove. In fact, I do it every day, in the last couple days, because I work as a teacher, and not having a blade in my knife just makes me feel a little bit better about following those rules. So all I have to do is get it about that angle and just slide it out once I pressed in the lock. It's quite easy. I can even do this without this little guard, by the way, but the guard makes a very convenient carry for this blade. And then, of course, I'm doing this through the camera, but you can see it's very easy to get it in as well. Now, the way this works, let me get it off again. Now, the way this works is, if you can see inside, the pivot itself has been trimmed. It's been flattened on not only this side, but on the back side as well. I've confirmed that after inspecting it closely, which means that the gap is narrower where it can slide on. But once it's turned, the only way that it can be slid off the pivot is for this area to actually bend. And if you look at the thickness, I believe, let me just double check this. Let me turn this on. Yeah, okay, we're in millimeters. Yeah. If you can see how thick this is, it's quite substantial in thickness. This is actually thicker than the Wave as far as the blade is concerned. And most of the pressure when it's open is applied in this lower half of the U shape down here. So it would be an incredible amount of force to actually bend this and actually knock it out of place. Using it, going against the blade, and then going behind it, it's really no human amount of force is going to do it. I mean, you'd have to do something pretty drastic to pop it out. Now, the ability to remove the blade is not a small thing, and we're going to go into why that's important a little bit later. First, let me finish off these tools. So the next thing we have is, of course, the 2D Phillips flathead hybrid. I'm actually kind of happy that they have this, because I found this tool to sometimes even be better because it hits a more varied set of Phillips screws, like a surprisingly, on pretty much every other Phillips screw, in fact, that the number 2 doesn't hit, this will practically do. And in some cases, even some very weird shaped screws as well. I'm hoping that this is narrow enough at the end that it can even be used as an eyeglass screwdriver. We'll have to see. The next thing, of course, is the tweezers, which is kind of different from most of the other multi-tools they have, and these are actually attached. They are very nice. I've played with the ones on the Micra, and I would say this one is actually better, at least the way it feels. It just feels like the steel is giving me more resistance. And I kind of, because it's such a small multi-tool, the way I grip it, instead of hanging out past my hand like a big tool would, and the fact that it's so light, it's actually kind of nice to be able to grip it like this, because I can really direct the location of the tweezers to where I want it. And actually, I've used them already. They're quite nice, quite nice. I'm not super sold on this flat driver. I mean, I guess it works for, the kinds of flats that you get in electrical for sure. It's going to work okay for that. I mean, it just has no other purpose, which is okay. But, that's pretty impressive for a tool this size to have that many tools. And I want to mention that this was before the Free existed. This is the first tool the Leatherman made that every single tool except the pliers were on the outside. And that's something that is unique. Now, here's the big part. Here we go. So this is probably the most interesting part of this whole tool is the pliers. I found out based on the diameter of the the blade, that these have the same pivot sizes as the Charge, the Wave, the Blast, etc., except that the thickness of this plier head is actually thinner. This is 6.3 millimeters approximately, and the one found in the Waves, the Blasts, the rebar, so on and so forth, they're all about 7 millimeters. So you wouldn't be able to reverse engineer one. And unfortunately, I'm not a huge fan of this particular shape, and I don't mean needle nose pliers. The problem with this is, here, if I can show you a comparison, this is the ones found in the Blast. You can see just how fine the tip is in comparison. And in my experience, when I'm using this part of the Phillips, of the pliers, it's really important for them to be thin so that I can work in very small spaces or make very small bends, or etc., etc., etc. These hybrid plier heads, they haven't been all that effective. I mean, basically you lose any good functionality of the needle nose pliers when you make these hybrids. Now, this tool already has very little leverage because of the length of the handles, so making it primarily, wrench based, if you will, by basically not making this very good, I mean, I think that's a real bummer. Now, I'm definitely going to reprofile this, and there's more than enough steel to work with, but I shouldn't really have to. And if I'm going to make one big criticism about this particular plier head, is I'd really like to see a true needle nose plier, like something like maybe like the one that's on the Mini, which I love. Oh my goodness, the needle nose pliers on the Mini is just wonderful. Super, super small, really easy to get into small spaces. It really bends wire well, all that kind of stuff. Just a good dedicated needle nose pliers. If I need to really wrench on a bolt, I potentially have access to better tools, I'm not going to risk damaging it with a multi-tool. I'm going to get a real dedicated pair of pliers. But when it comes to needle nose, I don't even own any, because I have a multi-tool that can basically do the exact same task, maybe even better. And the wire cutters are sufficient. They're perfectly fine. They're up to snuff compared to what Leatherman does, but the shape really bothers me. It's just probably the biggest reason why I don't carry the Victorinox Spirit as well. It's the same kind of problem. They both have these it's even more true for the Spirit, but they both have these very, very thick needle nose sections, which makes them basically into blunt nose pliers and really limits what they can actually do. I mean, this really doesn't get into anything. This one doesn't really get into anything that I want to use it for, unfortunately. And that's one of the reasons I don't carry the Spirit. Okay, so that's that. We're already up to 15 minutes, and I haven't really covered everything yet. So, first off, why would I be carrying a tool designed for kids? Well, I am a teacher, and I've been looking for a tool that doesn't have a blade, or at least has a blade option. And I didn't even, after buying all of these others and modding some, I honestly completely missed the Leatherman Leap. I don't know how, but this is a really great tool if you have a job where carrying a blade is maybe not exactly kosher. I really think that this is a great solution to that problem, and it is incredibly light. This is, I think, 4.9 ounces, so it comes in lighter than the Wingman. It comes in lighter than the Rev or the Sidekick, and has all outside opening implements of incredibly ergonomic handle. I mean, like, oh my goodness, this is surprisingly ergonomic. When I was bearing down on that knife, I was really feeling like this was a whittling knife, not so much a multi-tool, because it kind of feels like those very thick handles that are on, woodworking blades. It really comfortable. And it has some basic EDC kind of tools on it, like the scissors and the Phillips and the bottle opener, etc., the tweezers. So all in all, really good tool set for what it is. And the other thing, being a modder, that I had some excitement because this, being able to remove this, but also using it as a template, I think there's a lot of other things I could carry in that slot. The first one that came to mind, in fact, I bought it before the Leap, was the everyday tool made by Keyport. This is the Mocha tool. And believe it or not, let me see if I can pull, I might actually pull the blade out here. So, just to give you an idea just how perfect these actually line up. And I checked. These do in fact slide right in. It does in fact slide in with no resistance whatsoever. I mean, that's just a pivot I'm feeling. But I mean, and this spring, of course, stops it from going in. But this slides in perfectly. Same thing if you go for the thick side. It's definitely going to go in. So this would be a great mod so that I can, and even when I'm knifeless, if you will, and the funny thing is it sits such that you could probably grab this like one-handed as well. I can still have access to a couple more tools. How nice is that? Like a box opener or some hex wrenches. I mean, I don't necessarily need the bottle opener, but whatever. And definitely a pry bar. I mean, that's nice. So that would be a great complement. And it doesn't stop there. I think that we could modify, because the pivot size is the same as the one found in the Wave/Charge, you could modify any of these other outboard tools and fit them in this slot as well. That because the blade is thick enough, very thick, you could easily fit any of the outside tools in into the Leatherman Leap, which I think if you're really good at the metalworking side of things, I think you'll find that fairly interesting. Yeah, I mean, how can you really complain? It's $40, so it's one of the cheapest multi-tools, like fully sized plier head multi-tool that Leatherman makes. So to put it into comparison here, okay, it's the same normal full-size multi-tool plier head, okay? It's incredibly compact. Most of the weight is, in fact, the plier head. And it has all outside opening tools. It is one-handable. It is absolutely one-handable. I've been playing with it a little bit, so let me just run through that. So for the saw, you're flipping it around, you're pulling it out that way. For the scissors, now this is just normal kind of one-handed. And then of course the knife, which I'll just show you how I can slide it in with my bare hands. No problem. Now with this one, I turn it so that the blade's on the inside. Take my middle finger and pull it out. Then I can turn it and flick it up. And that's not hard to do. It just requires a little dexterity. So definitely doable, all one-handed. Now with a little bit of modding, like I'm definitely going to remove a little bit of the plastic, and I don't think that's probably all I need, because if I feel this is actually a really nice finger grip. It really does provide enough based on the size of the blade. I mean, I would absolutely be able to one-hand this if I just cut this just a little bit more. So that's one thing I would definitely recommend. And then I hope somebody reads this and makes a change to this this plier head. I really hate hybrid, like fat needle nose. I don't know what you want to call it, but they just don't do a good job at anything. You basically get a very compromised tool. I mean, more than most. I mean, a needle nose plier is useful. And at the end of the day, a needle nose plier by itself is an incredibly useful tool. I use them regularly to basically be stronger versions of my hands. And that by itself is quite important. And the tip being narrow is also very, very important. At least in my experience. I mean, anytime I've wanted to wrench on a screw, on a nut, yes, I can do it. And yes, this part gets in the way sometimes, but if I have to, it's got to be an emergency, because otherwise I'm not going to take the risk to damage the nut with a multi-tool. I'm going to go get an actual plier. I'm not going to use this. So overall, day to day, yeah, this is going to get the job done, man. It's going to crack those nuts, no problem. Oh, and that's the last thing. When you open it like a plier like this, when you put your finger, like you have to kind of move it like this with your finger, this piece of plastic is a dream compared to a lot of the Leathermans. There's all these hot spots on some of these Leathermans. Let's see. Here's a great example, the Wave. When you push up, you're catching your finger, depending on how stiff your plier head is, this could actually hurt a little bit. That little ridge and some of these indentations, or even the blade, are going to affect your finger. You're going to eventually get a little sore here if you're playing with it a lot. I mean, all of these things about the Leap are quite fantastic. So definitely I would recommend it. For the price, it's unbeatable. And there's little pieces here and there that are quite sophisticated, such as the fact that the spring tension for these small tools is separate between the two outer pieces. And what I mean by that is the flathead and the Phillips, they both have spring retention, but neither one interact with the tweezer. There's no retention in this, but there is in the other two tools, and they did it very interestingly with this little zigzag split in the springs. I mean, just a couple of very interesting design decisions in this tool. Definitely a well thought out tool, with the exception of this. Now maybe that's preference, but still I think you might want to consider it. Anyway, I hope that next time we talk about this tool, you'll be able to see the mods I've made, and maybe, with any luck, I'll be able to get this bad boy inside this Leatherman Leap, and that would be really cool. So anyway, have a good one. Bye.